as much as you could for any questions and then feedback. And just to let you know, we are going to record this event for just documentation purposes, and also we'll do live tweeting of this session. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, let me quickly give you the highlights of the program we have for this session. Shortly, we will hear about the importance of livestock system in CGIAR by Martin Croft, Managing Director of Resilience Agri-Food Systems at CGIAR. Following that, we'll hear about the role of livestock and its multi-problem-solving power, learning the past livestock research experience by Ian Wright, Deputy Director General of Integrated Sciences at ILRI. Following Ian's presentation, we'll have 3 interesting livestock innovations. We'll hear about antimicrobial resistance, a quintessential One Health issue, and societal burden that will be presented by Ashley Woodley, the CGIAR Marab leader. And then following that, we'll hear about the small ruminant value chain transformation by Barbara Richovsky, team leader, the Resilience Agro-Sylvia Pastoral System at ICARDA. And then finally, we'll hear about integrated approach for dairy development in Kenya by James Rao, agricultural economist at ILRI. Following these 3 interesting livestock innovation presentation, we'll have a very interesting panel discussion, which is going to be moderated by Michael Victor, Head of Knowledge Management and Communication at ILRI. And finally, we wrap up and close. Next, please. Without further ado, let me pause here and then invite Martin Croft. I think Martin Croft will not be with us to present in person, but we'll have his videos to play. I will ask my colleagues to play that from your end.
Yeah, coming up. Here we go. So yeah, Martin wasn't able to join us, but we do have a video introduction of his opening remarks. So we'll share that with everybody.
Thank you, Michael.
Good morning. I'm Martin Croft. I'm in the CGIAR Managing Director for the Resilient Agri-Food Systems, crops, livestock, and fish. This side event is very special, and very honored that I can say a few opening remarks on sustainable livestock production as a multi-problem solving solution for climate, health, nutrition, and livelihoods. So we developed a new research and innovation strategy as CGIAR, where we work even more together with different CGIAR centers, as you know. And in this case, of course, in livestock, it's ILRI, it is ICARDA, and it is the Alliance Biodiversity and CIAT. And of course, other centers work with them as well, like IFPRI. So new approaches to confront food, land, and water crises through scaling action and performance areas and performance management. So fresh portfolio of initiatives to deliver a new 10-year strategy addressing global and regional challenges and knowledge gaps, working in close collaboration with hundreds of research and scaling partners. We make a portfolio that is demand-driven, demand by the farmers in the region, in the global south, and of course, with the agendas of the governments and of the continents like Africa. So we work on 5 impact areas that are closely related to the Sustainable Development Goals: nutrition, health and food security, poverty reduction, livelihoods and jobs, gender equality, youth and inclusion, climate adaptation and mitigation, and environmental health and biodiversity. And livestock systems are playing a very, very important role in all of these. The key and the heart of the process is basically that we move from CRPs, CGIAR research programs, we moved in January this year into CGIAR initiatives, 32 of them. And they are structured in 4 groups, basically. One group is on genetic innovations, mainly on crops, but also some work is done that livestock benefits, but livestock genetics is being done in the Resilient Agri-Food System and initiatives. So Resilient Agri-Food System initiatives is farm, landscape, integrated technical, socio-economic solutions. But for livestock and fish, the genetic component is in there. Then we have, for system transformation, where we are looking more at governance issues, policies, institutions. And these three science areas work together. And I have the honor to lead the Resilient Agri-Food Systems initiative. And then on top of this, we have in all the regions in the world, and 6 in the global south, 3 in Africa, Latin America, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. We have regionally integrated initiatives. That's where we do not start with the discipline where we come from. For example, livestock genetics or feed or forages, those kind of things. But basically, we come there from the demand approach. So what is the demand? What are the challenges in that region? And what science is needed to fight the bottlenecks, to find solutions for the bottlenecks through scientific-based innovations. Really challenging. All these initiatives started, and also several of them picked up the livestock issues. So I'm very proud of this whole new portfolio. Joost Spinnen is taking the system transformation initiatives, and Sonja Vermeulen is doing the genetic innovation initiative with fabulous leads and co-leads and work package leads of the initiative. So the 3 initiatives on livestock, and you will hear more about them later. So we have One Health. What can I say? With just coming out of COVID, moving hopefully not into COVID again, but we hear the stories. Super important, related to zoonosis, related to AMR. Very important that we work properly on livestock health in a global way. And coming from the Netherlands, I also know all the problems about microbial resistance. Sustainable animal productivity, sapling. This is one of the largest initiatives, almost as large as agronomy, and just as large as agronomy, and almost as large as all the crop breeding. Because livestock is important in relation to mitigation, because of course it contributes to all the climate change. We can mitigate it through better science and better breeding and management, but also adaptation. So very important 3 key initiatives that are just focusing on livestock. But then we have 8 initiatives in addition that also work with livestock, but in relation to the whole cropping systems as well. So national policies and strategies. That's not just about crops, not just about livestock or fish. We need to bring it together. The foresighting initiatives in the system transformation, where we look what's resilient, can we understand the process? Gender equality, women, super important as farmers, for a large part, responsible for the systems. And then we have mixed farming systems. What can I say? Half of the system in the global south, people told me that they are mixed farming systems. So that's where we have to bring livestock and crops work together. Then the resilient cities. We have a new initiative. We are now also looking in resilient cities. We haven't been working so much on that as CGIAR, but of course, all the huge cities in the global south, they need supply and sustainable supply. And livestock is important there as well. Diversification, there's 2 regional initiatives, one in East and Southern Africa, diversification of the system, and one in South Asia, transforming agri-food systems. So livestock is very central in our new CGIAR portfolio, and I'm proud of that. And then, of course, we have the investment in livestock in the CGIAR. We are designated to ensure that the livestock sector in the global south plays a full role in providing safe, nutrient-dense meat, milk, and eggs to support the nutrition and health of the most vulnerable, including women and young children, and also providing and supporting millions of jobs, contributing to economic development, but also promoting livestock and livestock value chains as a vehicle for bringing about transformational change in women's lives, but also minimizing greenhouse gas reductions from animals. And it's possible, and ensuring livestock and those who depend on them can cope with future climate change. A huge challenge, and we really need to do much and much more than we do today. That's why we have also a special initiative, we call it shortly LCF, livestock and climate change. So, and then last but not least, minimizing the environmental footprint of livestock while optimizing the sector's contribution to well-managed landscape and biodiversity. Livestock is in the heart of the CGIAR, in the heart of the portfolio. We are now moving to many more systems approaches, although livestock itself is also very big in terms of disciplinary areas, from genetics to management to the value chain to the consumer. So basically, our overarching objective is basically to contribute to agri-food systems transformation with science for affordable, sufficient and healthy diets produced within planetary boundaries in a climate crisis. And livestock is a key element in there. So what we will see today is a bundled approach to research solutions for productivity, bringing together animal nutrition, genetics and health, as well as engaging throughout the value chain. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to a very successful special session in this FAO forum. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this will take us to the next session. Colleagues, still I will encourage you, if you have any question, comment, feedback, put it in the chat and we'll get back to you. Let me kindly invite now Ian Wright, Deputy Directors General of Integrated Sciences at ILRI, to give us the next presentation about the role of livestock and its multi-problem solving power. Ian, are you online?
Thank you very much, Desai. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you very well. Over to you.
Good. Thank you. So, good morning, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone online. Delighted to see such a large audience for this side event. Delighted to have you all with us. So, the livestock sector is one of the fastest growing economic sectors in low and middle income countries. Demand for animal sourced foods is growing rapidly, fueled by population growth, urbanization, rising incomes. And this offers huge opportunities for the livestock sector and people who keep animals. But it also poses some challenges that we can't ignore. I want to highlight briefly how, with technology, investment, and the right policies, livestock can contribute fully to food security and nutrition, health and economic development, while at the same time respecting planetary boundaries and contributing positively to the environment and social and gender equity. Let me begin with food security and nutrition. Livestock-derived foods can play an essential role in reducing levels of malnutrition. For their nutrient dense, they provide rich and diverse essential micronutrients, especially for those often the most vulnerable, including poor rural women and children. Stunting, which is a major challenge in many low and middle income countries, childhood stunting is a major challenge, but it's not just a physical effect. It affects cognitive development, learning ability, and social development. The World Bank estimated that Africa is losing 10% of its GDP annually due to child stunting. But animal-sourced foods can have a critical role in reducing that burden. Consumption of animal-sourced foods in Africa, for example, is a tiny fraction of that in the developed world. And we must recognize these regional differences. Many people in low and middle-income countries, especially the most vulnerable, would benefit from even a very small increase in the consumption of those foods. Livestock support over 1.3 billion people in the world who depend on livestock to some extent for their livelihoods. Think about it, 1.3 billion people. That's one person in 5 on this planet depend on livestock to some extent. Currently, the sector contributes an average of 40% to global agricultural GDP across developing countries, ranging between 15 and 80%, depending on the country. And the sector can be a significant engine for economic growth. For livestock keepers in low and middle income countries, livestock provides many other benefits. They enhance soil nutrients, provide social security and insurance in times of need, including as well as transport and draft power. At least half of the staple cereals underpinning food security in Africa, for example, can only be produced because livestock are integral to the system, providing income, animal power, and manure. Livestock can also provide business and employment opportunities, not just in production, but all along the value chains, especially for young people and women. Indeed, those opportunities can be transformational for women's lives. However, of course, we know the sector is not without its challenges, and we must deal with them. The first is climate change. We know that emissions have to be reduced, and whilst many see livestock as a problem, efficient, low-carbon, sustainable livestock production can enhance rather than harm the environment. Second is health. About 2.4 billion human illnesses and 2.2 million deaths are caused each year by zoonotic diseases that can be transferred from animals to humans. And the vast majority of that burden is in developing countries. 70 to 80% of emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic. In terms of food safety, the burden of illness and disability-adjusted life years, or DALYs, is comparable to the burden of malaria, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS combined. About 1.2 million deaths a year are a result of antimicrobial resistance, and some projections suggest this could rise to 10 million by 2050. A new challenge: the polarized narratives around livestock and its products that leave us with two extreme groups of advocates. One that says livestock's great, the other says it's all bad, get rid of it. Coverage of the livestock sector in international media outlets tends to be dominated by some voices from the global north, focused on negatives, with little media coverage of livestock's more positive contributions to livelihoods, incomes, and equality, especially in the global south. Without a doubt, the livestock sector must address these shortcomings. And as we will see in the presentations today on sustainable livestock innovations, there's a lot that's being done. At the CGIAR, we've been working together as one for almost 10 years. The innovations you will hear today were started in the previous CGIAR research programs on livestock and on agriculture for nutrition and health, where CGIAR centres came together to develop an integrated approach to improve sustainable livestock production, safeguard human health, and strengthen rural livelihoods. This has evolved, as we've heard from Martin, into the new CGIAR Systems Research Agenda, which brings together these areas. As Martin said, we are bundling technologies to deliver to farmers. What you will hear today are three good examples of that. In terms of human and animal health, we will look at issues of antimicrobial resistance and issues related to surveillance, animal, human, and ecosystem health. Then we'll have an example that focuses on the innovative approach to improving small ruminants and their importance to local economies, gender, and resilience. Here again, we don't just look at single technologies, but at a small includes community-based breeding, forage development, community organisation, and working with value chain actors. Finally, we will hear the story of dairy in Kenya and the use of an integrated packaging approach, including looking at animal health, genomic selection, and feed and forages, as well as effective delivery models via digitally enabled managers, dairy farmer assistants for wide and sustainable uptake of innovation packages. One of the key opportunities for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from livestock in low and middle income countries is through increasing individual animal productivity. For example, adoption of improved practices by smallholder dairy farmers in 5 countries in East Africa could reduce absolute carbon equivalent emissions by between 8 and 16% by 2030, whilst increasing milk yields by 60% and creating thousands of additional jobs. The right policies and investment stock could accelerate food systems transformation in low and middle income countries and help feed a fast-growing population in a healthy manner, especially young women and children, while respecting the environment and providing job opportunities for those who need them. So we hope through the presentations and discussions, we will demonstrate that the best way to ensure sustainable livestock is not to exclude livestock from discussions on sustainable development, but rather to make sure that livestock options are part of the solutions on offer. Thank you very much. Back to you, Tessa.
Thank you so much, Ian, for bringing together the different aspects of past research and also for setting the scene for us. Thank you so much. Any question, comment for Ian, please put it in the chat and we will respond it there. This will take us to the next presentations about the livestock innovations. We will start from the antimicrobial resistance one. Let me kindly invite Ashley Moodley, the AMR Hub lead.
Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Over to you.
Good afternoon from Copenhagen. Can I get my slides up, please?
Are they up?
Not yet, Michael. Maybe.
Let me try again.
Okay.
Is it up now?
Maybe move it to the next one. It is on the blank page now.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. It was,
Yeah.
sorry. It was up, but yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Good.
I thought the whole thing wasn't up. Sorry.
Good. It's good. It's working now. Over to you, Ashley.
Thank you very much. And as I said, good afternoon. I get to talk to you about one of my favorite subjects that I've been working on for close to 20 years now. And I think Ian quite rightly highlighted both the positive and negative effects associated with the livestock sector. And I'd like to focus on just one of those, which is antimicrobial resistance, as it is one of those challenges that is one health and it affects, it's cross-cutting across all of the sectors, but it's also a development problem exacerbated by poor conditions, by poverty. And what I'm going to share with you is a little bit of how we can approach AMR in a low and middle income context. Next slide, please. And this is how I view AMR, is that firstly, we have to accept that antimicrobials are incredibly essential to not only our lives as humans, but also those of our animals and the crops that we produce, because they are the things that we use in order to fight infectious diseases. But by virtue of our use of these antimicrobials, we select for antimicrobial resistance, which cannot be eradicated. And therefore, it's a balance between, yes, we need these compounds, these drugs, and they are essential, but by using them over time, we reduce their efficacy. And so we need to balance these two opposing arms. But particularly in the livestock sector, on the veterinary side, we are faced by an additional dilemma, is that there are no new antibiotics in the pipeline. And therefore, we really need to think about how we use what we currently have and use it in the most judicious way possible. Next slide, please. When we look about, or when we think about antimicrobial resistance, I think we need to think about it as a soup. And I think this picture tries to illustrate that it is a mix between antimicrobial residues as well as resistant organisms. And these two are in fact helping each other, driving each other, where one is selecting for another one. And this is all happening as the soup of residues and resistant organisms that are being transmitted and easily transmitted between the different compartments. Next slide, please. But it's also to look at it in a global perspective, is that while when we think about ecosystems, we think about them typically in the environment in which we are conducting our research, but really with antimicrobial resistance, it's something that is happening all over the world, and it's been spread all over the world to travel, to the movement of animals in our food. And so we need to be mindful of how we address AMR as it is able to escape boundaries, and therefore we need to think about what we do nationally, but also what we do globally. Next slide, please. I think importantly is that in 2016, we had this major drive of, from global leaders on how we address AMR, and a big global push on countries having to develop national action plans in order to address this issue. But every year, countries do a self-assessment in where they are along with the implementation of their national action plans. And I looked at the latest track survey, which is a country self-assessment. And ideally, what this is looking into is how countries rate themselves in their ability to minimize or reduce antimicrobial use, and as well as the transmission of resistance between the different compartments. particularly focused on the animal sector. And ideally, what we want is countries to be in the green, because that means that at a nationwide level, they are implementing good animal production practices, which is then leading to this reduction in use. But as you can see, there are very few countries that would consider themselves green. The other challenge that we have is a data crisis, in that we are making decisions without good quality data, particularly in low and middle income countries. And this is a report for the African continent in a crisis within a crisis, because we are making decisions, but we're flying blind. Next slide, please. We don't know a lot of things about AMR, and particularly, but we're still making decisions. And particularly when we think about, and when we talk about antimicrobial use in the livestock sector, you'll hear things about 2/3 of the global use of antibiotics is in livestock. And I will not discuss that here, but I think it's important that we need to think about how much antimicrobials are we using in the sector, because for sure in low and middle income countries, we do not have that data. If you look at the latest WHO report on that reports import data, Africa is one of the lowest amongst all the other continents. But more than that, it's about actually the use and how does that contribute to resistance, and how is this resistance then being transferred into humans, and then humans then becoming sick with a bacteria that is resistant from animals. And this attribution we don't know. So there are a lot of things here that we don't have any information about, but yet we are still pushing forward with action plans, with making interventions without really knowing a lot of things. Next slide, please. Just click, click, click. One more time, one more, perfect. One more, yes. So I think it's about a balance, and this is how I think we need to view antimicrobial resistance over reduction of antimicrobial use. It's a balancing act. We know that use is essential. It's important to animal health and welfare, which is also linked to then productivity. And we know, as Ian said, that the animal sector is very much linked to livelihoods and food and nutritional security, but it's also linked to gender and youth equity. And this needs to be balanced by antimicrobial resistance. We know that we need to produce more food as populations grow. And how do we do that? How do we manage disease in these populations? And so the value of antimicrobials are incredibly important. We know that farmers are faced with many challenges in relation to feed crisis, climate change, but we also know that consumers in low and middle income countries particularly have low consumer power. Whether they can demand is an important aspect, which is very different from high income countries. So I think in many cases, yes, we need regulations, and in some countries we don't have good regulations, but regulations are not really enough. And while the focus for a lot of the AMR reducing activities has been around capacity development, and I think capacity development is incredibly important, both on a technical side, but also in terms of understanding and appreciating AMR and the detrimental effects of that. But what are the real incentives for farmers to reduce their use when antimicrobials are incredibly essential to that production? And so this is the balance that we face ourselves, is how much use can we allow and how much resistance can we also tolerate?
1 minute.
Next slide. Next slide, please. So I think we also need to think about is who we're asking to do what and what resources do they have. And typically the people that have to make these changes are those individuals that don't have a lot of resources. And when we look at antimicrobials, they really are seen as quick fixes to a very broken system. And so we need to address that system. Next slide, please. And how could we address AMR in the livestock sector, particularly in low and middle income countries? I think we can think about it in two ways. One is about improving the system. The other is about improving individual farmers' behaviors. And this is then looking at those behavioral changes and nudges and how can we trigger them. Next slide, please. And really what we think about, and I think this is incredibly important, is this transdisciplinary approach to AMR, because it's incredibly complex. While we want farmers to just simply reduce their use, But what we're asking farmers is what the pyramid is, which is about good animal husbandry practices, vaccination, biosecurity, and prudent antimicrobial use. And within them are individual behaviors, desired behaviors that we need farmers to incorporate. But then you have to pepper many other issues that farmers are facing. There are gendered impacts. We know very little, but we're trying to understand what is gender and the role gender plays for AMR in agriculture. Climate change, counterfeit drugs, and the lack for good incentives. And I think my colleagues coming after me will try to look at this in a bit more integrative way of how can you put different packages together to address how do we build a good system. So I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I think still I will encourage participants to put your question in the chat and she will respond it there. Let's move to the next one and let me kindly invite Barbara Richovsky to give us the next presentation about small ruminant value chain transformation. Barbara?
Thank you very much. Say hi. I hope you can hear me well. Dear colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, it's a great opportunity to share our smart interventions for small ruminant value chain transformation with you. I present this on behalf of Mikada ILRI team. Next slide, please. The innovation I want to share with you is called Smart Pack. Smart stays for small ruminant value chain transformation. The Smart Pack is an integrated package of 5 bigger innovation areas that address the challenges we identified when we went on this journey of transformation of the small ruminant value chains in Ethiopia, which are around low animal productivity and that there's a high market demand, but the supply is simply not matching with the demand. So this integrated package comprises access of smallholders to improved sheep and goat genetics, a herd health package, improved feeding strategies, but also how to facilitate that markets work for smallholders. And we also had a lens on gender to see how we can make women more active participating in the value chains. We think some of our success factors were that we started with multi-stakeholders that helped us to identify, prioritize, and co-create the innovations which are in Smart Pack. But we also think that the common approach we took, which is a community-based approach, which was very participatory, helped us really to get to our expected outcomes, which is, of course, that the smallholders adopt this Smart Pack and to reach the big goal of better performing sheep and goat meat value chains. But that is not enough. We also wanted to see women more actively involved. We wanted to get more services on board, and we wanted to advocate for national support for this program. And the impacts which we expected and which we have seen and which we will take over into the new initiative on sustainable animal productivity is more productive animals and higher incomes for the producers, but also better outputs for the consumers. Now, if we work on higher animal productivity, that also has positive environmental effects, especially as we will see reduced emissions per unit product. But also when you work on improved feeding strategies, you have a lot to contribute to more healthy crop rotation systems and to reduce degradation of overgrazed communal areas. Next slide, please. I will not be able to unpack the full Smart Pack here for you. So I've chosen 2 examples of innovation areas. One big one was community-based breeding programs. We started on developing those about 11 years ago. And what I want to quickly highlight here with that a bit complicated slide is to show you that there's a lot of science behind one innovation like community-based breeding programs. And you will see a lot of different activities and research that has to come together to get to these functional community-based breeding programs. And I want to highlight here specifically what is very important is to get the breeding structures right, that they work for smallholders. In our case, we made the participating farmers to work in one big community herd in which we then selected the best animals. It is also crucial to have the right data in place so that we can really give the support for the right decisions on the right animals. And for this, we developed with a private company, a cloud-based genetic database, which is really helping us to provide the information. And the ultimate goal is that with a click, you get the estimated breeding value of your candidate animal. This is very well documented with a lot of publications, but with also a lot of other knowledge products. Next, please. Let me share also a more softer innovation, which were our gender innovations. When we started on the journey with our partners, we saw that the capacity of the partners in terms of gender aspects related to livestock value chains was relatively low. So we thought this needs a thorough assessment. We developed tools for the assessments. We then developed really tailor-made training programs. We coached our partners on the action plans. And then we evaluated if the whole innovation of this gender capacity development was useful, and we saw really positive results. Another big area, as I said, is that we wanted women to become more active in the value chains and benefit more from them. So we did a number of assessments to look at their current situation, their current roles, and their control over assets, also how women can be empowered. And then we came up with the innovation which we call community conversation, which works around the technical area. So we create awareness about zoonosis, but then we also discuss the communities themselves, discuss very critically the roles of men and women to better understand zoonosis in this case, and how to prevent it. This is also well documented. Next one. As I said, I will not unpack the full smart pack. Instead, I wanted to share some thoughts with you. I mean, the whole smart pack is a very complex innovation, and even the single innovations are already complex. So how do we get that to scale? So one of the important, and I listed a number of thoughts, and I hope we have a discussion later also in the panel about this. But I wanted to share specifically that we think that one of the things which is very important is that you have a very good practical description of your innovations. We also saw that if you have national or local champions which promote your innovation, that you drive much quicker to scale. And one thing which is very important, but which is a bit beyond our control, but where we can facilitate, advocate, is of course enabling environment.
1 minute.
If you go then to scaling integrated innovation packages like SmartPack, the whole thing becomes even more complex. You need more partners, and you need even a more complex enabling environment. Next slide, please. So can it be done? It sounds complicated and so on. We think it can be done. We also think we are implementing already. And we wanted to take as the entry point one of our best known and widest spread innovations in the moment, which is the community-based breeding programs. And we wanted to now in sapling change from a village approach to targeting a full sheep population, in this case, Vashera sheep. And we have already a number of partners who are implementing CBBPs. And these CBBPs are supposed to then also benefit the production units and finishers so that more animals get to the market. We have put all this in numbers, as you can see in this slide. But we think that once this is in place, then of course, the other innovations which are part of SmartPack will also be taken up along the same framework. Next slide, please. So my message here is it can be done. We have already put complex innovation like community-based breeding programs a bit more to scale in Ethiopia. And I show you here a lot of dots where we have already this community-based breeding programs in Ethiopia, which we use as entry point for SmartPack. And I hope that after 4 or 5 years along the sapling, we can show you an equal map of uptake of SmartPack in Ethiopia and in the other small women value chain target country of sapling, which is Mali. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And let me go to the next presentation. I see lots of conversation happening in the chat. Please continue asking the questions. Colleagues will respond to you. Let me move to the third one to hear about integrated approach of dairy development in Kenya. Let me kindly invite James Rao, agriculture economist at ILRI, to give us this presentation. James?
Thanks a lot. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, James. Over to you.
Good, thank you. So I would like to talk a little bit about how we organize delivery of improved or proven dairy technologies in a way that can enable joint or bundled uptake by farmers, because we believe that it's not just the individual technologies that can actually work and deliver the result for farmers, but the technologies need to be adopted together to have more effective results. So next slide, please. Yeah, so the main problem we are dealing with here is low productivity among smallholder dairy farmers, which actually leads to low enterprise profitability and eventually leading to low value chain competitiveness. And this discourages investment in productivity enhancing technologies. We end up with farmers that are just trapped, or smallholder farmers are trapped in a vicious cycle of low input and low output, because they get very little from what they from the investment in dairy. They have less marketable surplus, which when they resell to the market, they get less returns. And this less returns implies that they do not have enough to invest back into technologies that can enhance productivity. So they are caught up in this vicious cycle of low input and low output. And likely this is driven by several factors. One of them is singular use of technologies, where farmers use either maybe a feed technology that can only take them as so far, but misses out on other complementary technologies that can help realize the synergy that would bring about a bigger impact. And the other problem is that farmers have limited knowledge, especially the smallholders, the knowledge to be able to optimize on technology choices and use. And many times, many of them do not have access to qualified managers who can help them organize and coordinate their farm activities to realize the needed productivity. Where some of these managers exist, some of them are actually ill-equipped to catalyze technology uptake. The other challenge is that most of these smallholder farmers are challenged by climate change issues that also still compromise production potential of the smallholder dairy systems. Next slide, please. So what innovation how do we try to address this? So we try to address this through an integrated delivery of proven technologies and practices through innovation packaging. So we package both not just the technologies alone, but also bring this together with an effective delivery model. So on my left hand here, we have a set of technologies that we are trying to push through in these systems around handheld packages that enhances health of the animals, but also has effect on fertility and productivity as well. And then we also apply genomic selection that help us to identify tropically adapted dairy breeds, and also select appropriate forages that are suitable for different agroecology, where most of these smallholder farmers are located. So on this side, you have technology packaging, which you believe has the combined effect, which is greater than the sum of the effect of individual technologies. Then on the right here, just click on, yeah. Go forward. Yeah, just click forward. Click. Right, up to there. Yeah, so sorry, just go back. So apologies. So on the right here, you have a set of smallholder farmers who, because of their scale and their ability, are not able to access more optimized management systems. So we address this through what we call a shared manager, or what we call a dairy farmer system, who we equip with several tools. One, these guys are equipped with digital decision support tools. For instance, they have a dairy profitability app, which enables them to have a structured discussion with farmers. So their decisions or discussions is anchored on profitability. derived from this dairy profitability are based on individual farmer condition. And this enables them to start identifying which are the low-hanging fruits that they can target to turn their farms around. And through this structured discussion, they are able to identify which technologies actually can move them from loss-making into profit-making as a dairy enterprise. Again, this dairy farm assistance also act as a linkage between farmers and different value chain actors, including input suppliers and AI and animal health technicians. So when they identify issues on the farm and agree with the farmers on what needs to be done, they are the ones who actually identify the inputs and the technologies that are needed, and they bulk these orders and link them to suppliers. And the suppliers can now organize or coordinate the delivery in a more efficient manner. So this is an innovation on delivery that is anchored at the cooperative level. And what we begin to understand is that extension can no longer be a free item. So how do you pay for this? You pay for this through this check-off system that is anchored at the cooperative level, which is linked to the delivery or the returns or the proceeds, milk proceeds from the delivery that farmers make at the cooperative. Next slide. Yeah, next. Yeah. So what is the science behind what we do? So first of all, for the individual technologies, we are leveraging genomic selection to identify tropically adapted dairy breeds that are more adapted to local conditions. Because for a long time, dairy systems in many of the developing countries have tended to rely on temperate breeds that are not well adapted. So through genomic selection, we are able to identify and promote tropically adapted dairy breeds. Then we also use selection methods to identify forage varieties that are climate smart, those that are adapted to the fast agroecologies and also climate change limitations. Then we optimize technology combinations to ensure that we increase the depth of our impact, leveraging on the complementarity among inputs produce synergies. So for instance, we know that appropriate feeding not only improves productivity, but also enhances health and immunity of animals, while also having impact on fertility. So genetics, health, and feeds have implications for each other, and therefore they give you more optimal results when they are applied together and in combination. On the other side, we also look at collective action. While individual farmers may not have the capability to employ managers that can manage their dairy farms, through shared farmer management model, they are able to equally access quality management that help them to optimize on technology and the input decisions that enhances their profitability. So what we expect to see at the end is enhanced knowledge and uptake of improved technologies. And you begin to see, investment decisions at farm level changing from the choices of technologies that farmers make and also the choice of inputs and technologies that they use. Next slide. And what we do in all these has implications actually for climate change, because one, through genomic selection and selection of appropriate forages, we are actually trying to respond to climate change concerns and trying to get tropically adapted breeds and forage varieties. But also the fundamental thing, which Ian also mentioned, is that more productive animal, the herds that have fewer, more productive animals have been shown to have higher emission per unit of output. And therefore, by having more productive animals in the herd, we are actually limiting or reducing emission per unit of output. And then finally, underfed animals that are fed below their maintenance feed intake also increases methane yield from enteric fermentation. And therefore, if we optimize on practices and husbandry and enhance our feeding intake by the livestock, then we're able to reduce greenhouse gas emission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James, and all of you, the three presenters, for your excellent on highlighting the activities and the work around your topics. I can see the interesting and the engagement from the participants, how they were interested to listen to your presentation in their engagement in the chat. So continue asking questions and feedback in the chat, please. They will respond to you. Let's take 2 minutes before we move to the next session for another interesting panel discussion. Let's do 2 minutes chat poll. So let me explain how it works. This is the question in the chat from Michael already puts it. The question, what resonated with you? Practices or ideas, gaps, question, listening to all the 3 livestock innovations. What is something which is resonated with you in terms of practice, ideas, gaps, or question? Think about this for 20 seconds, write it in your chat box, and I will count from 1 to 3 for you to press enter. Please respond in your chat box for the questions. No, not yet, Barbara.
Hi, that was an answer to a question in the chat,
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you, now I understand. I saw that. What resonated with you from what you have heard from the 3 presentations? I'm going to count from 1 to 3. Now, this is the time for you to press your answer. 1 to 3, go. Let us know the need for and the impact of a smart package. Okay, excellent insights from Ashni AMR, special on behaviors. The challenge ahead in AMR, community-based breeding program, AMR. Okay, good, AMR, keep coming. The need for climate smart livestock practice, good presented. AMR, smart package, okay, good, keep on typing that. Now, let me kindly invite Michael Victor, Head of Knowledge Management and Communication, to moderate the next session. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks a lot, Sahai, and thanks to all 3 of the presenters. Some really interesting presentations. And I think this will really lead into a great panel discussion, and we have a great group here. So I'd like to ask each of the panelists to turn on their camera, and we'll spotlight them. And I'll start off with introducing all of them. First, start out with Badi Bespes, who's the Senior Animal Production Officer at the Animal Production and Health Division, and also Secretary to the COAG Subcommittee on Livestock at FAO. Next, I'd like to, we don't have Mary today, but I'd like to introduce David or Di Harvey, who's the Technical Director of Land O'Lakes. Are you there, Di? There you are, I see you, you're in the middle now. I'll add a spotlight to you. Great, and then we have Lee Kondo, Nordhusen. Are you there?
I'm here.
There you are. Great, Lee. Thank you very much. We'll add you. And then we have Tini Swani, who's the CEO of Aga Khan Development Network in India. And sorry, I didn't introduce Lee's full kind of title. She's the Climate Change and Operations Specialist for the World Bank. So thanks a lot. And Tini, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, there we are. Great. And then finally, we have Mariangela Ramirez, who's the Senior Agriculture Specialist for the World Bank. And I think I saw you as well.
Good morning.
Great, great to see you. Thanks, everybody. Let me add the spotlight there. So great, we have the panel here. And just really quickly, I want no more than 1 minute, but just a quick kind of thought. What were your kind of key takeaways? What resonated with you when you saw these presentations? Badi, can you start us off? Just a quick idea of what resonated with you.
Yes, with a great pleasure. Good afternoon, everybody, and a big thank to the presenters. What I retained from the 3 presentations is, do you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we do. We hear you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If I retain a word, is integration or integrated approach, not only for small ruminant and dairy, as nicely illustrated by Barbara and James, but also for all actions, including the AMR. And I retained from Ashley the interface for AMR between animal, human, and the environment. Just to say that AMR is very high in the agenda of FAO and is addressed as part of the One Health approach, which fully aligned with what Ashley has presented. I would like just to mention, this raises for me the issue of the use of medically important antimicrobial, and Ashley referred to that, and she explained that the livestock sector is a big user of antimicrobials, and the issue of the use of medically important antimicrobials as growth promoters is a big issue, and we need to promote alternative feeding practices to reduce this field. Of course, Ashley referred to good husbandry practices, but I would like to focus here on alternative feeding practices. And for this reason, the subcommittee requested FAO, the World Organization for Animal Health, and the Research Institution to make an inventory of these alternative feeding practices and disseminate this knowledge. And I hope that we will work together on this. Over to you, Michael.
Great, that's excellent. Really interesting and great to hear about like some work that we can do together. Lee, how about you? Any quick thoughts on what resonated for you?
Very quickly, what resonated was the increasing sort of awareness, but also the increasing importance in knowing or learning more about the interconnectedness between the environment, people, and animals. That's all.
Great. Okay, excellent. Dai, how about you?
Yeah, firstly, congratulations to all of the presenters. Fantastic presentations. I think it was good to see that the thorny issues were being raised up, and some of the more challenging aspects of livestock production were being addressed. I thought that was excellent. You know, the antimicrobial resistance, acknowledging there's a problem is the first start when you're looking for a solution. Looking at difficult things like feedback loops that James kindly talked to us about, and how to make sure that those are working better. Fantastic. And then the local solutions for local problems, I thought, under the animal breeding or community-based breeding, fantastic bits of work, and really exciting. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Tini, over to you. Any thoughts?
No, thank you so much. And I just would also like to congratulate the three presenters. These were very interesting presentations. So I think the thoughts that really resonated with me were the challenge of AMR. I think that is something that, you know, we really have to focus on. And as Barbara said, I mean, the challenge is how do we avoid and prevent the overuse of antibiotics? And therefore, perhaps the need for us to work on disease prevention and really strategize interventions on how do we prevent the spread of diseases. I think the other thing that also really resonated with me was the significant role of women in livestock production systems, whether we take, and largely in the small livestock. And therefore, our training programs, all of the work that we do, how do we actually contextualize it to the priorities, the needs of women, timings of training that suit them. So I also felt a lot of parallels with the work that we are doing on community-based breeding programs here in India, also with the support of Abacus Bio, as we saw in Ethiopia. So I think those were some of the things that resonated with me, Michael.
Great, excellent. And Miriangela, how about yourself? Any?
Yes, Michael, my takeaways from today's presentations, which I also agree were very good, are somehow in line with what Lee shared. More than in a specific topic, I think it's great to know how the perspective on the livestock sector is changing, and the understanding of the role of the sector as a great contributor and opportunity to address climate change, to promote nature's health. That is really boosting interest and the initiation or the starting of new initiatives that are all really valuable, all really interesting. But the great challenge we have going forward is how to really make all these initiatives in a harmonized way, to make sure that all contribute to each other, to make sure that we don't rebuild the wheel as we think on the steps we have to take to sustainably transition the sector. So just to make the point that on the great need of coordination, not only across within countries but across regions as well.
Excellent, very interesting. I mean, we'll get back to this too, and what that kind of poses for investments later on. Badi, just to go back to you, you mentioned that I think in COAG that they're very interested in, looking at the, what did you say about the, the feeds with AMR as well. What other kind of areas do you see in terms of synergies with FAO's work, or demands or needs or priorities that you see that these innovations or these areas should be working on?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for this question. Really, based on the presentation today and based on the concept note that distributed, I see a good alignment between the CGIAR initiatives on One Health, livestock and climate, and sustainable animal productivity, and the subcommittee major area of work. Let me say that the major of work for the subcommittee is a sustainable livestock sector for food security and nutrition and inclusive economic growth. And we can see clearly here linkages with the sustainable animal productivity of the CGIAR. Animal, public and environmental health through the One Health approach. This is the second major area of work of the subcommittee. And we can see a really direct link with the work on One Health, and including the work on zoonosis and work on AMR, and just the work I mentioned on alternative feeding practices to reduce AMR is part of this area of work. And last but not least, natural resources use, climate change and biodiversity. And basically, both Barbara and James addressed aspects of this in this area of work. So we really see a nice alignment between our programs of work, and this for this I take the opportunity to invite CGIAR to become an active partner of the subcommittee and contribute to its work. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Badi. And I'm sure we'll take that up and really try to work, really directly with COAG as well. Lee, just wondering, since you're the climate specialist, looking at some of these, particularly at the dairy, what do you think about some of the climate mitigation measures? Is there things more that have to be done, or there's things more that we have to amplify, particularly when you're thinking about investing in these sectors as well?
Well, I'd like to first tell you a story, and this links to my answer later on. Basically, last year we worked with SIA to support a farm called Hacienda San Jose. And basically what we're doing is to help them improve cattle ranching and forestry operations. So SIAT was our boots on the grounds, boots on the ground, and the intervention focused on demonstrating and maximizing carbon benefits and understanding the carbon impacts for the Colombian beef market. The way I see it, we need good data. We need good, robust, solid data. And unless you know what your data is, you wouldn't know how much you're going to invest. And this is what I think a lot of investors are looking at right now, especially those who want to invest in sustainable or responsible operations. So I do think that more needs to be done in quantifying this data. Capacity needs to be built, and other than that, making sure that when you have your GHG emissions, you make sure that you monitor them well, that it's reported well, and that it's verified well. You need a solid MRV system. That's all for now. Thanks.
Okay, just a follow up to that, actually, because it's interesting. You've been talking about that here. How do you fund those? Because especially in Africa, in many kind of low and middle income countries, a lot of those systems and the technologies for measuring that data aren't there. Yeah, how would you go about doing that then?
There are some funds available for this, climate funds. This project that I mentioned to you about with Hacienda San Jose in Colombia, this was funded by the Forest Carbon Partnership Fund. My team, got some funds from them, sort of sub-grants, whereby we tried to demonstrate a proof of concept, how to bring multiple actors together under one integrated framework. And for Colombia, we use the value chain approach. I do think that there are quite some funds available that can produce, that can support that are done through grants, and there are some concessional loans. It's a matter of, what I notice is that in terms of climate finance, it's a matter of, firstly, the readiness, and two is the awareness of the potential recipient of what is actually available out there.
Great, that's excellent. It's good to know that there's funds available for that. So people working in this field can take note of that. Dai, just kind of thinking, you've been working on this on the other end from the delivery side and really trying to figure out the research extension linkages here. What do you see, what's missing in kind of particularly in what James presented and maybe even in what Barbara presented in terms of delivery? Do you see anything missing, or is there ways to create better synergies in the areas that you're working in as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you very much for that. Yes, I mean, I think both James and Barbara's areas are very interesting. I think whenever we're looking, and this was touched on by Barbara and a little bit by James, whenever we're working in these environments, we've got to realize that you're sort of not working in isolation. So I think that the policy piece and the enabling environment is really, really important. And in particular, realizing that every country, every region is different. And so that sometimes the solutions are not always a cut and paste solution from one country to another. I would just add and sort of re-amplify a couple of things that I think have been the reason why those particular interventions have been successful, and that is the link to the market. So the offtake market is really critical to be able to put money back into the system. Far too often, we really focus on outputs and productivity and forget about the market side of things, and realizing that people need to make a living out of their livestock, I think is very, very important. And then one final piece I'd just add that we find very helpful is the feedback loops, and realizing that you won't get it right every time, and you've got to really have a look at seeing how can that feedback loop come in, and then you adapt to the situation as ever they're changing. I think critically important, we know the drought in the Horn of Africa at the moment is devastating, and so how do you adapt to that, and then how do you think about things in the future? I think those would be just a couple of extra things to look at. So meaning your research and your extension messaging needs to be adaptive. It can't be a one-hat-fits-all situation, if that helps.
Great, really interesting. Yeah, and I think adapting this flexibility, being nimble, being able to respond to some of these issues is really, you know, the new way that we have to do research as well, research and development. Tinny, just in terms of, you've already kind of discussed quite a bit about, you know, you were talking about how the approaches kind of matched yours in terms of the bundled solutions and looking at, you know, the community-based breeding programs. Yeah, if you were to compare your programs and what Barbara presented, yeah, where are the similarities, synergies? Is there anything not missing, but, you know, things that you're doing differently that are adapted to your context as well?
So I wouldn't say doing things differently, Michael. I think one thing, there's also a question in the chat box, which actually, you know, says that, I mean, One Health is a subject of much research now, but are we really seeing action on the ground? And we really now need to take these, you know, all of this research that we're doing to the ground. What can we do in terms of really implementing a One Health approach? I mean, what is required to really implement a One Health approach? Is it a focus on disease prevention so that, you know, minimum amount of antibiotics are used for animal health? Should we focus on extension messages that actually improve feeding practices, therefore the health of the animal, therefore the immunity to withstand diseases? So I think disease surveillance. So I mean, here in India, the program that we are working on, we have actually built a cadre of women community-based paravets who focus on disease prevention and vaccination to prevent diseases, deworming to improve health, feeding practices, a lot of work around extension. And what we've seen is, say for some diseases, for example, PPR, where we actually carry out annual rounds of vaccination. We have not seen PPR occur in the areas in which we work. We also, because small livestock is owned and reared by women, the focus is on building capacities and understanding of women, and how do we actually take women to higher stages of the value chain. We don't see women in livestock markets, for example, in India. Is it because livestock markets are inherently unfriendly and you know, are not really designed for women? Or is there more work that we really need to do so that women really benefit from these value chains? And that understanding goes back into how they raise their livestock, and therefore the reduction in dependence on antibiotics and such like. So I feel we also need to take approaches from the research agenda and really see how we can implement them on the ground. I mean, what would it take to implement One Health approaches on the ground? What would be the key elements of those approaches? I think we now really need to move to that agenda. One Health has taught us, the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that, you know, this One Health really needs to now move to a real response situation around wildlife areas. You know, how can we really ensure that there is minimal interaction? So do we really need to protect these wildlife areas from you know, livestock going in and all of that? So I think that for us, and I think collectively we should look at how do we implement One Health approaches on the ground. In terms of parallels with what was presented, I think the community-based breeding pilot, we have been trying to do something here as well. We focus a lot on identifying good quality bucks through the same Ditrio package that actually tells us which does are you know, the best in terms of breeding for bucks. We haven't reached the numbers that have been reached in Ethiopia. We are far lower than that, but I think there's immense opportunity for us to learn from the approaches in Ethiopia in our country as well. So I'll stop here, Michael, and if there are any questions, we could come back to them.
You're in mute, Michael.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Lee. Yeah, so Mariangela, one of the things we haven't really touched upon, but was a key theme that when we started talking about this session was about trade-offs. And it was a bit kind of, Lee brought it up, you know, when we start talking about climate change and really getting the data and really making sure that we're sustainable, what are the trade-offs in terms of food security, nutrition, livelihood development, and how do you balance those two? And maybe at the, how do you see that in terms of where we need to prioritize, particularly in some of the low and middle income country areas that we're working in, or contexts that we're working in? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Mariangela.
No, it was me. Well, I think that's exactly one of the key topics that we are trying to understand. Trade-offs seem to be in either case lower than the benefits that can arise from working on this area. So if we are thinking about, let's say, the business case and the impact case of all initiatives that are trying to improve livestock for a contribution to climate and nature health, as I mentioned before, what we can anticipate, regardless on the specific case we are discussing, or the trade-off we are discussing, is that the benefits will likely offset any trade-offs we have. I think that's why this is so important to keep momentum and continue disseminating the well-grounded empirical knowledge that we can develop with CGIAR and working in partnership with research organizations. I think this is exactly the World Bank's motivation to finance CGIAR and to work in partnership with key research institutions. We know that as we provide policy advice and investment lending, we have to make sure that those are based on solid and scientifically strong research. And that is definitely something we can achieve by working closely with CGIARs.
Okay, great. Excellent. Anyone else have in the panel any other thoughts or comments on trade-offs and how we kind of address those? Because it's something that, and what you saw in these presentations, particularly looking at, I mean, we saw it with the One Health and with the small ruminants as well as the dairy. Anyone have any other thoughts? Di or?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting as we're going forward, looking at what framework we're looking at. FAO have been leading the way with the food systems type approach that many people are looking at, and I quite like that, and you heard me sort of mentioning earlier on. So looking at things not only from an economic perspective, but also looking at from a social and from a planetary and climatic area. I think that's where the trade-offs come off, and we can't be too heavily weighted on one side, and then lose the plot. So I think that would be sort of an area. A lot easier said than done, but certainly charting that sort of middle ground. And making sure that we're charting the middle ground, and that social inclusion piece I think is really important, that we've been talking a lot about, of making sure that the social inclusion, particularly access for youth, as our younger populations across the less developed parts of our planet, how do we get them involved, and how do we get them included in this, in the important piece of providing food and nourishing people going forward. So yeah, that would be a couple of comments I'd make on that.
Great, excellent.
If I could also
yeah,
just
go ahead,
here, Michael. I also feel that we really need to build information around the livestock agriculture link. Ian touched upon it in his opening remarks, and we tend to paint livestock then as the bad intervention contributing to climate change and all of that, the GHG emissions from livestock, but we are forgetting the very strong link between livestock and agriculture. I mean, where we work, often it is livestock that is keeping agriculture going. When people need to procure seeds to put into their farms, they're actually selling a goat to procure those seeds. The manure component, I mean, it is the manure that will keep our soil health actually feeding, going forward. So I really feel in all of our discourse, we must strengthen the livestock agriculture link along with the livestock nutrition link. I mean, those are two such powerful links that, and therefore livestock cannot be ignored. I mean, its contribution to agriculture, its contribution to nutrition is something that we have to continuously reiterate. All of our data, we must get that to support these very strong linkages.
Excellent, really, really nice. So with that, we're going to close it off. Betty, I saw your hand. So we'll start with you, and you can add in what you want to say, but just really, we want, again, this rapid fire. What's your one message to the CGIAR Livestock Systems Group, if you have one, and what you want them to do, what's missing, or what you want them to keep on doing? So Badi, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Michael. I just want to add one short statement about the trade-offs. In our view, the trade-offs there is, or the solutions, maybe when you talk about trade-offs, you're talking about solution. There is no single solution. There is no single bullet, silver bullet, and the solutions and trade-offs are context specific. What is true in one country is not true in another country. So, and this is a decision of policymakers. And when it comes to trade-offs, they have to get informed choices. I mean, they have to get informed and science-based information, and it's up to them to make what is the best for them. I think this is, I wanted to mention that. In terms of my message to the CGIAR colleagues is, would like to take the opportunity to reiterate our desire to work with the CGIAR, because FAO is not a research organization, but it's in the interface between the research and policy making. And for our members wants to have all the narrative, all the work and the governing bodies science-based and evidence-based. So we need the CGIAR to provide this evidence and the science to help decision making. Thank you. Over to you.
Great. Lee, let's go over to you.
Yes, thanks, Michael. If there's one thing that comes to my mind, it's basically follow the money. So the demand for animal source food, animal source products are rising. That's where it's going. In a lot of low and middle income countries, the demand is rising. So if there's something that I would like to tell CGIAR, it's continue, keep going, keep doing the work. We do need the data for good decision making, not only for policy, but also for investments. But the money will be in these countries where the demand is rising, and follow the money. Thank you.
Great advice. I think everyone will take that one. Mariangela, would you want to go next? You've been always at the end, so let's put you up at front here.
Thank you, Michael. Well, I think that we have to promote that all the knowledge that is generated and disseminated really translates into policy development and incentives to crowd in private financing. So we make sure that, yes, knowledge doesn't remain in the lab, but really goes out to the field and scales up. And both the policy development and alliances and coordination to crowd in private financing are paramount to create an enabling environment, or basically a systemic development or deployment of investment that will help mainstream climate smart and sustainable livestock practices across the globe.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Tini, any last final comments?
I think it's a little linked to what Mariangela said as well. I mean, how do we take research to the ground? I think CGIAR and FAO have done a lot of work around One Health, and that's really admirable. It would also be useful now to actually, like a toolkit on how do we implement One Health approaches on the ground. Of course, we will contextualize to different contexts and different countries, but what can be implementable approaches on the ground that grassroots organizations can implement around One Health. So I think that would be something really useful, and happy to engage on that discussion going forward. Research has to come to the ground, otherwise it's not useful for anyone. So I think that definitely, that's something that I would like to just put there for your consideration.
Great, thank you very much. And Dai, over to you. Last comment, last words.
Excellent. I get the last words, so no one can come back on me, which is fantastic. So yeah, my comments will echo many of the other comments said ahead of me, which is I really like the idea of looking at local solutions and understanding that nothing is that there will be similarities, and as the CG, they're pretty good at this, looking at what are some of the common problems or some of the common challenges, and then how do we get some look at solutions. The key is always the scaling, and that's the challenge, the scaling, and then the feedback. I think the feedback loop, how do we adapt? How do we change what we're doing? And this thing I've said again and again about adaptation. We have to be more and more adaptable as the goalposts are moving faster and faster, particularly for older people like myself. It's more and more difficult to adapt. So I think that's really helpful. And yeah, keep up the good work for CG. And I think my final piece would be, I think, for all of us who are involved in livestock, just remembering not to tire to remind people the importance of livestock, particularly in the global south. I think the global north has got a different agenda, and we just need to remind people that in the global south, how the importance of livestock and how that is contributing positively to the planet rather than as a negative. And I think that would be another piece I would just add in.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone on the panel. That was, I think we got some really great insights. And I'm actually really happy because now I can hand it over to Ian to give a conclusion, which I think would be very hard to conclude with all these like really incredible remarks and presentations and some great chats as well. But thank you guys very much. And with that, I'll hand it over to Ian to come in to provide some final comments and conclusions. You're on mute, Ian. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm not going to try and summarize that extremely rich and interesting discussion and presentations. But maybe I want to just highlight one or two points, some of the things I heard during the presentations and discussions. I probably have five points I want to make, and I will be brief, because I realize our time is running out. The first is, I think that we've heard a lot about the opportunities and the challenges in the livestock sector. And from a CGIAR perspective, you know, as a research organization, our role is to optimize those opportunities while minimizing the opportunities for livestock sector to contribute to nutrition and health, to employment, job creation, economic development, but also deal with the challenges that we know exist in terms of climate change, in terms of environmental degradation, and so on. And how do we go about balancing those things? And what also came out clearly, I think, is there is no one size fits all. We heard Dai just mention at the end of the panel discussion there, the kind of global north versus global south perspectives, which is very true, and we do have to continue to remind people of that. But also, as Badi made the point, you know, it's not just at that level. There are differences between countries in the global north or between countries in the global south, and we have to be cognizant of the differences. Again, no one size fits all, so we have to be able to adapt and reflect on those differences. I mean, for example, Ashni mentioned in her presentation on the AMR. I mean, we know that in the global north, the vast reduction in the and microbial use in the livestock sector has come about by two things: regulation and consumer pressure. those levers don't necessarily exist in the global south. So we need to look for other levers. How do we bring about behavioral change? How do we provide alternatives to smallholder producers? We're going to be very cognizant of that. And then we've had a lot from the presenters and from the panel about how we need to bundle things together. We heard about bundling technological innovations. There's no point in improving genetics if you can't keep them healthy and so on. But there's also a broader aspect of integration in terms of, as I think Di mentioned, the market demand. We have to be integrated with markets, otherwise new technologies will not be taken up. We have to think about the policy and the enabling environment that will allow the livestock sector to flourish and realize its potential and make a difference to people's lives. The third thing I heard mentioned was about alignment of the actors in the livestock sector, so that the livestock sector can speak with a unified voice. And Badi mentioned the COAG subcommittee on livestock, of which he is secretary. I was actually talking to the chair of that committee this morning, Ambassador Cherniak, and that's very high on his agenda. He wants to ensure that there's alignment amongst all the actors in the livestock sector. Now, all those actors are coming from very different starting points. They're coming from different perspectives, but at the end of the day, I think if we work together, we can identify a common vision, accept that we're all coming from very different starting points. So how we get to that common vision is going to be different for different actors, but I think we can come together to achieve that common vision, coming from our very different starting points. And then finally, just towards the end of the discussion, panel discussion, there was some discussion about trade-offs, synergies, and benefits. We talk a lot about trade-offs, and there are trade-offs and difficult decisions to be made by governments, by international organizations, but by farmers, smallholder farmers. But I think over the last few years, we've perhaps realized that there may be more synergies than trade-offs. I'm not diminishing or denying the fact that there are, but I think we've heard how we can build on the synergies. I think we've heard about how we can link increases in productivity to improve livelihoods, to improve nutrition, to improve income, to economic development, while at the same time achieving environmental benefits through reduced not only emission intensities from livestock, but through absolute emissions and greenhouse gas emissions from livestock. So I think we've learned a lot through research in the last few years that there are many, many synergies and benefits. Well, we also have to think about the trade-offs. So finally, I just want to add my thanks to everyone who has participated, the presenters, especially the panelists, for a very rich discussion, and the many hundreds of people, I think we were up to 160 or something at one point, online, for also contributing to the chat, contributing to the discussion, asking very relevant questions and providing relevant comments, and thanks to all of those of you who have responded and tried to answer those questions. I realize that every question in the chat we've not been able to answer, we haven't had the time, the capacity to do so, and hopefully we can do that in the near future. Thank you very much. Back to you, Michael.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Thanks a lot. That was great. And again, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us. This was a really useful session. I think a lot of ideas for where we go in the coming years and everything, and really bringing together this livestock and integrated approach. So thank you very much, everybody. And we will have the recording out, we'll have a blog, and we'll have the slide deck so everyone can have those, and we'll send that to everybody who attended as well as everybody who had registered. So again, thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you. Bye.